The first knock came from roommate. That shouldn't have been possible. Because roommate hadn't had a guest in it for almost 11 years. I know how that sounds. If I were listening to this story instead of telling it, I'd probably assume the same thing you're assuming right now. Old building. Bad records. Employee mistake. But I worked night audit at the Red Mesa Motor Lodge for 14 months, and there were exactly 3 things every employee learned during their first week. First, never rent roommate. Second, if someone asks for roommate specifically, tell management immediately. Third, if you hear knocking from inside roommate after midnight, don't knock back. I broke that third rule on my 93rd night working there, and 3 people disappeared before sunrise. The knock came at 2:17 a.m. 3 slow taps. Not on the front desk. Not on the lobby window. From down the hallway. Roommate. Tap. 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 I looked up from the security monitors. The hallway camera showed an empty corridor stretching beneath flickering yellow lights. No movement. No guest. No one outside the room. Then the knocking came again. 3 taps. From inside. I stared at the monitor. Roommate had been locked for years. Maintenance kept the key in the manager's office safe. There wasn't even furniture inside anymore. At least that's what I thought. The radio on the desk crackled. Night audit. It was Earl. The manager. His voice sounded awake. Too awake for 2 in the morning. You hearing it? I looked toward the hallway. Another knock. Yeah. Silence. Then, don't answer it. The line went dead. The Red Mesa Motor Lodge sat 40 miles outside of town near the Arizona-New Mexico border. Technically it was a motel. Practically it was a refuge for truckers, drifters, tourists who underestimated desert distances, and people who didn't want questions asked. 23 rooms. 1 ice machine. 1 vending machine that only accepted cash. 1 rulebook. Not employee guidelines. Rules. Actual rules. Typed pages. Laminated. Signed by every employee. Most were normal. Don't give out room numbers. Never leave the front desk unattended. Call police for disturbances. Then there were the others. Rule 7. If a guest arrives on foot between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., ask which highway they used to get here. If they say they didn't use one, do not check them in. Rule 11. If room 14 calls asking whether room 7 checked out, tell them yes regardless of occupancy. Rule 16. If a guest reports animals on the roof, apologize and offer a refund. Do not investigate. Rule 19. If you see the same vehicle enter the parking lot twice without leaving in between, lock the lobby doors and contact management. Rule 23. If roommate becomes occupied, leave immediately. No exceptions. That was the only rule written in red ink. At 2:24 a.m. the phone rang. Caller ID showed room 12. I answered. A woman whispered, "Someone's outside my window." I pulled up camera 9. Nothing. "What do they look like?" Silence. Then, "They look like my husband." I checked registration. Room 12 was occupied by a married couple from Colorado. "Ma'am, is your husband in the room?" Another pause. "No." My stomach dropped. "Where is he?" "He went to get ice 20 minutes ago." I checked camera 4. Ice machine area. Empty. Then she said something that made every hair on my arm stand up. "He keeps smiling at me." I looked back toward room 8. Tap. 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 The hallway camera flickered. For 1 frame. Less than a second. Someone was standing outside room 8. Tall. Thin. Facing the camera. Then gone. Police arrived 36 minutes later. No sign of the husband. No footprints. No vehicle missing. No evidence he'd ever left the room. According to the deputy, the wife eventually became hysterical and started insisting her husband was standing behind the officers while they questioned her. There was nobody there. She refused to leave without him. By sunrise, both of them were gone. The room was empty. Luggage gone. Car gone. Registration record gone. Computers showed room 12 as vacant all night. The deputy who took the report never returned my calls. 2 weeks later, his name disappeared from the county department website. I should have quit. Instead, I asked questions. That was my second mistake. Maria, who worked mornings, told me the motel used to have 24 rooms. Not 23. Room 8 wasn't originally room 8. It was room 24. The last room added during an expansion project in 1987. Employees started disappearing. Guests checked in and never checked out. People reported family members acting wrong. Smiling too much. Standing outside windows. Knowing conversations they shouldn't know. Eventually, management sealed the room. Renumbered the building. Pretended room 24 never existed. Problem solved. Except it wasn't. Because the room kept moving. 1 year it was room 17. Another year it was room 3. Then room 19. By the time I worked there, it was room 8. The number changed. The room didn't. The first time I saw one up close was in November. Snowstorm. Power outage. 3 guests in the motel. At 1:13 a.m. someone walked into the lobby. Barefoot. No vehicle. No footprints in the snow outside. Male. Mid-40s. Perfectly normal except for one thing. He looked exactly like me. Not similar. Not close. Exactly. Same height. Same scar on my chin from high school baseball. Same watch. Same jacket. He smiled. I need a room. I couldn't speak. He looked down at my name tag. Daniel. Then he smiled wider. That's funny. He leaned toward the desk. That's my name too. The lights came back on. He was gone. Security footage showed nobody entering the lobby. But camera 2 captured me standing alone behind the desk talking to empty air for 6 minutes. Earl finally told me the truth 3 months later. Or at least part of it. The locals called them skinwalkers. Management hated that word. Too simple. Too folkloric. According to the motel owners, the things using the rooms weren't animals. They weren't spirits. They were reflections. Copies. Possibilities. Versions of people that almost existed. Versions looking for somewhere to go. And the motel, for reasons nobody understood, acted like a door. Most doors open one way. Red Mesa opened both. Why keep the place open? I asked. Earl looked exhausted. Because when they shut it down in 2004, the copies started showing up in town instead. I laughed. He didn't. They reopened 6 weeks later. The major incident happened on March 14th. 3 buses arrived at once. No company logos. No license plates. 31 passengers. Every single one requested room 8. Every single one had the same birthday. Every single one listed the same emergency contact. Every single one used my mother's maiden name. I called Earl. He arrived in 11 minutes. Looked at the registrations. Turned pale. Get everyone out. What? Now. The lights died. Every television in every room turned on simultaneously. Security cameras filled with static. Then voices started coming through the intercom system. Not random voices. Our voices. Mine. Earl's. Maria's. Conversations we hadn't had yet. Future conversations. Arguments. Warnings. One sentence repeated over and over. Don't let him check in. I looked toward the lobby entrance. Someone was standing outside the glass doors. Me. Older. Maybe 60. He looked terrified. He pointed toward the registration cards. Then he shook his head. Behind him stood 31 people. Every single one wearing my face. The buses were gone by morning. No tire tracks. No guests. No records. Except one registration card. Room assignment: 8. Guest name: Daniel Mercer. Check-in date: March 14th, 2037. 11 years in the future. I still have the card. The signature is mine. I quit the next day. Packed my apartment. Moved to Nevada. Changed jobs. Changed numbers. Changed states. For a while I convinced myself the motel was behind me. Then 6 months ago I checked into a roadside motel outside Reno during a work trip. The clerk slid over my room key. Room 8. I asked for another room. She frowned. We don't have a room 8. I looked down at the key again. The number was gone. Just blank plastic. Then someone knocked on the lobby door. 3 slow taps. The clerk looked confused. There isn't anyone there. I looked through the glass. There was. A man standing outside in the rain. My age. My face. My jacket. Smiling. He raised one hand. And knocked back. 3 times. Tap. 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 I don't stay in motels anymore. I don't answer hotel phones after midnight. And if you're ever driving through Arizona and see an old neon sign for the Red Mesa Motor Lodge glowing out in the desert, keep driving. Because according to state records, the motel burned down in 1998. 27 people died in the fire, including the night auditor. His name was Daniel Mercer. He was 29 years old. Same age I am now. And according to the death certificate, his body was found inside room 8. The room that didn't exist. The room nobody rented. The room that still knocks sometimes. 3 times. Always 3. And lately, I've started hearing it from inside my apartment walls. I probably should explain what kind of place the Red Mesa Motor Lodge actually was. Because if you're picturing one of those clean roadside chains with automatic doors and corporate logos, you're imagining the wrong kind of motel. Red Mesa looked like America forgot it existed. 23 ground floor rooms arranged in a horseshoe around a cracked parking lot. A faded swimming pool that hadn't held water since the early 90s. 2 soda machines. 1 flickering ice machine. A giant neon sign that only managed to light up 3 letters after sunset. Red M_SAMO_L. Most nights the desert wind did more talking than the guests. That was exactly why the owners liked it. Privacy. Distance. Isolation. The nearest town sat 42 miles west. The nearest gas station was 23 miles south. If your car broke down out there after dark, Red Mesa usually became your only option. Most guests arrived tired. Some arrived scared. A few arrived already looking over their shoulders. The employees learned not to ask why. My shift started every night at 11. Earl would hand me the keys, the radio, the emergency binder. Then he'd ask the same question. Anything unusual? Every single night I answered the same way. Not yet. Every single night Earl answered with the same sentence. Then you still have time. The first week I worked there, he handed me the rule book. Not an employee handbook. Not training materials. Rules. 27 of them. Laminated pages inside a black binder. No explanations. No stories. No context. Just instructions. Rule 1. Lock the lobby doors at midnight. Unlock them at 6. If someone enters without opening the door, call management immediately. Rule 4. Never whistle inside the building after sunset. Rule 9. If a guest asks whether the motel has always had 23 rooms, answer yes. Rule 12. If someone asks for directions to Black Cotton Road, tell them the road no longer exists. Do not elaborate. Rule 15. If room 5 reports children playing outside after 2 a.m., apologize for the noise complaint. There are no children staying at the motel. Rule 18. If a guest appears in the lobby wearing motel staff clothing, do not speak to them. Rule 22. If the coyotes stop making noise, lock the office immediately. Wait for them to start again. Rule 23. If roommate becomes occupied, leave. No exceptions. That one bothered me. Not because of what it said. Because of what it implied. At some point, someone stayed. Long enough for management to create a rule around it. Long enough for somebody to survive whatever happened. Long enough for somebody to decide running was the only solution. You don't write rules for impossible situations. You write rules for situations that happened before. Maybe many times. The strangest part wasn't the rules. It was how seriously everyone treated them. Maria refused to whistle during her shift. The maintenance guy crossed himself whenever he walked past room 8. Even Earl avoided looking directly at its door. One night I asked him why. He stared at me for several seconds. Then he asked a question instead. Have you ever noticed hospitals don't keep records of ghosts? What? Hospitals keep records of diseases because diseases repeat. He looked toward room 8. If institutions make procedures for something, it means they've seen it enough times to measure it. That answer stayed with me. Because it wasn't comforting. It meant somebody had gathered data. Patterns. Statistics. Failures. How many people disappear before you create policy? How many bodies before you print laminated instructions? The first strange thing happened on my 12th shift. A truck driver checked into room 16 around midnight. Friendly guy. Kansas plates. Said he'd been hauling produce through Arizona for almost 20 years. At 1:48 a.m. he called the front desk. Yeah, I got a weird question. Go ahead. Who's standing outside my door? I checked the hallway camera. Nobody there. Sir, I don't see anyone. Silence. Then, well, somebody's breathing out here. I zoomed in on the camera feed. Empty hallway. The truck driver lowered his voice. Sounds like me. I frowned. What? The breathing. He swallowed. It sounds exactly like me. The line disconnected. 5 minutes later he called back. This time he sounded terrified. It's knocking now. 3 knocks echoed faintly through the phone. Tap. 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 My stomach dropped. 3 knocks. Always 3. Sir, do not open the door. Another knock. Closer this time. Then another sound. A voice. His voice. Talking from the other side of the door. Open up. The truck driver started crying. How is that possible? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Then his voice came through the phone again. Only now there were 2 of them. One inside the room. One outside. Both talking at once. Both saying the same thing. Which one of us is inside? The line went dead. Police arrived 40 minutes later. Room 16 was empty. Truck gone. Luggage gone. No signs of struggle. No fingerprints. No registration records. The surveillance footage showed something even worse. At 2:03 a.m. the truck driver opened his door. Stepped into the hallway. Looked directly into the camera. Then smiled. A second later, another truck driver walked out of the room behind him. Identical. Same face. Same clothes. Same movements. The 2 men looked at each other for almost 10 seconds. Then both walked out of frame in opposite directions. Neither appeared on any other camera. Neither was seen again. The sheriff collected the footage personally. By the next afternoon the recording was missing from the system. Earl wasn't surprised. Neither was Maria. Neither was maintenance. Instead Earl opened the rulebook. Took out a pen. And wrote a new entry. Rule 24. If you hear your own voice outside your room, do not answer questions. Do not respond. Do not confirm your identity. I watched him laminate the page himself. Like he expected somebody to need it tomorrow. The thing that scared me most wasn't the rule. It was how much empty space remained in the binder. 3 blank laminated pages waited at the end. As if management already knew there would be more rules eventually. As if the motel was still teaching them. As if whatever lived around room 8 was still evolving. And sometime around 3 in the morning, while the desert coyotes screamed somewhere beyond the parking lot, I started wondering something I probably shouldn't have wondered. If these things copied people, where did the originals go? Because nobody ever seemed interested in finding them, only replacing them. The first thing that convinced me the motel wasn't just attracting these things was the key inventory. Every motel employee checks keys at the beginning and end of their shift. Simple procedure. 23 rooms. 23 keys. Every hook accounted for. Except Red Mesa never had 23 keys. It had 24. Hook number 8 sat empty. Always. There wasn't a key. There wasn't even a label. Just an empty brass hook between room 7 and room 9. When I asked Earl about it, he acted like he hadn't heard me. I asked again. He looked toward the security cameras before answering. Every few years, he said quietly, a key shows up there. What kind of key? The kind that means someone made a mistake. That was all he said. 3 nights later, the hook wasn't empty anymore. An old brass key hung there, stamped with a number. 8. I stared at it for almost 30 seconds. I hadn't heard anyone come in. Nobody had entered the office. Nobody had access to the key cabinet except employees. I picked up the radio. Earl. Static. Earl, the key is back. Nothing. Then the radio crackled. Not Earl's voice. Mine. Put it back. I froze. The voice continued. You're going to need it later. The transmission ended. The radio returned to static. I didn't touch the key again. The guests started changing after that. Not all of them. Maybe 1 out of every 10. Small things at first. One woman asked me where the 4th floor vending machine was. The motel only had 1 floor. A man asked why we had removed the playground. There had never been a playground. Another guest complained that his room number kept changing every time he looked away. He checked into room 11. His key said room 11. His receipt said room 11. But every time he walked back outside to smoke, the number on the door changed. 12, 13, 14, 15. Then back to 11. Maintenance checked the room. Nothing unusual. By morning the guest had left. Or at least we thought he had. 3 days later I saw him again. Same truck. Same clothes. Same room. Same check-in paperwork. He introduced himself exactly the same way he had the first time. Word for word. When I asked if he'd ever stayed with us before, he looked confused. No, first time. He even laughed. I'd remember a place like this. I didn't tell him he already had. Twice. The coyotes disappeared next. That sounds insignificant. It wasn't. The desert around Red Mesa was never quiet. Wind. Insects. Animals. Something. There was always noise. Then one night. Nothing. No coyotes. No crickets. No wind. The silence felt wrong. Heavy. Like the entire desert was holding its breath. Then I remembered Rule 22. If the coyotes stop making noise, lock the office immediately. Wait for them to start again. I locked the doors. Turned off the lobby lights. Waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. Then movement appeared on camera 6. Parking lot east entrance. Someone walking toward the motel. Tall. Too tall. The figure crossed beneath the parking lot lights. Its proportions were wrong. Arms too long. Legs bending slightly backward. Its head tilted as if listening to something underground. It stopped directly beneath the lobby window. And smiled. The face belonged to Earl. The body absolutely didn't. It stood there for almost 20 minutes. Never moving. Never blinking. Just smiling through the glass. The coyotes started howling again at exactly 3:14 a.m. The figure was gone before I unlocked the doors. The next morning Earl watched the footage 3 times. His face turned pale. That's new. That sentence scared me more than the footage. New? He nodded slowly. They usually stay human proportions. Usually. That word stuck with me. Usually. As if there were categories. Variations. Types. As if somebody somewhere was collecting observations. Building profiles. Tracking behavior. The motel wasn't dealing with random monsters. It was dealing with a population. 2 weeks later, the federal vehicles arrived. 3 black SUVs. No markings. No plates. 4 men. 1 woman. Nobody smiled. Nobody introduced themselves. They asked for occupancy records dating back 15 years. Security footage. Maintenance logs. Incident reports. Then they asked for something stranger. Guest complaints involving mirrors. I watched Earl hand over an entire filing box. One of the agents noticed me staring. How often do they use reflections now? I frowned. What? The woman looked at me for several seconds. Then she realized something. You haven't been briefed. Earl stepped between us immediately. We handle local procedures ourselves. The agent looked irritated. That stopped being true in 2007. Nobody explained what happened in 2007. Nobody answered questions. They stayed for 6 hours. Then they left. But not before placing something inside the office safe. A metal lockbox. Government seal. Instructions printed across the front. Do not open unless roommate becomes occupied. I asked Earl what was inside. He looked away. I've never opened one. One? He hesitated. They replace it every few years. 3 nights later I found the first body. At least I think it was a body. Room 3 reported water leaking from the ceiling. I grabbed maintenance keys and headed over. The room above room 3 was room 8. The room that supposedly didn't exist. The hallway looked normal. Door 7. Door 9. Empty wall between them. But the water was real. Dark liquid dripped steadily from the ceiling tiles. I followed it. Straight to the space between room 7 and room 9. Drip. 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 I touched it with my finger. Not water. Blood. Fresh. A sound came from inside the wall. Movement. Slow footsteps. Then breathing. Then 3 knocks. Tap. 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 I stepped backward immediately. The breathing stopped. A voice came through the wall. Quiet. Male. Weak. Please. I froze. Please let me out. The voice sounded familiar. Too familiar. Then I realized why. It was mine. I've been in here a long time. I couldn't move. Couldn't think. The voice spoke again. Don't let him take your place. The hallway lights flickered once. Twice. Then the voice changed. Same voice. Same words. Different tone. Smiling somehow. You already did. Silence returned. The blood stopped dripping. By morning there wasn't any evidence it had happened. No stain. No leak. No wall damage. Nothing. Except for one thing. A fingerprint pressed into the drywall beside where the voice had come from. My fingerprint. According to the sheriff's department. An exact match. The problem was, I had never touched that wall. At least, not yet. That was the night I finally understood something important. The copies weren't merely imitating people. They weren't learning behaviors. They weren't wearing faces. They already knew us. They knew memories they shouldn't know. Conversations we hadn't had. Choices we hadn't made. And somehow, somewhere, they seemed to know our futures better than we did. Which raised a question that kept me awake for the rest of that week. If something inside room 8 already knew the person I was going to become, how long had it been watching me? And worse, was it learning from me? Or was I learning from it? The first rule to fail was Rule 11. That was the one about Room 14. If Room 14 calls asking whether Room 7 checked out, you tell them yes. Always yes. No matter what. Nobody ever explained why. Nobody ever questioned it. At 1:07 a.m. the phone rang. Caller ID. Room 14. I already knew what the question would be. Front desk. A woman's voice answered. Has room 7 checked out yet? Yes. Silence. Then, they're still here. The line disconnected. I stared at the receiver. That wasn't how it worked. The question was supposed to be the entire interaction. The answer ended the call. Every employee knew that. Apparently so did whoever was inside room 14. The phone rang again immediately. Same room. Same voice. You lied. The line went dead. 5 minutes later, room 7 called. A man whispered into the phone. Someone keeps walking past our window. I checked the camera. Nothing. Can you describe them? A pause. They look like the people from room 14. I opened the occupancy records. Room 14 was vacant. Had been for 3 days. The guest in room 7 lowered his voice. They aren't walking anymore. I frowned. What are they doing? Another pause. Standing. My stomach tightened. How many? Silence. Then, more than before. I pulled up every exterior camera. The parking lot looked empty. Then camera 8 flickered. For one frame. There they were. People standing around room 7. 10. Maybe 12. Perfectly still. Facing the windows. The image vanished immediately. The camera returned to an empty parking lot. Another flicker. Now there were more. Closer. Every frame added another figure. Like photographs of a crowd assembling between blinks. The final image, before the feed died, showed 23 people standing outside room 7. One for every room in the motel. All looking at the same window. All smiling. The guest checked out at sunrise. Or at least somebody did. The man walked into the lobby carrying his bags. Normal conversation. Normal smile. Normal checkout. Then he asked something strange. How long have you worked here? 8 months. He nodded. Long enough to know the difference then. The difference between what? He looked toward the parking lot. Between the ones that come in and the ones that come out. Before I could answer, he left. I never saw his truck leave the property. That afternoon, Maria didn't recognize me. Not metaphorically. Literally. I walked into the office to grab coffee. She looked startled. Oh, sorry. She laughed nervously. I thought you were Daniel. I stared at her. I am Daniel. Her smile disappeared. For several seconds she just looked confused. Then embarrassed. Right. She laughed again. Of course you are. She avoided eye contact for the rest of the shift. The next night she asked me where Earl was. Probably sleeping. She frowned. No. Earl quit last month. I laughed. He worked yesterday. Maria slowly shook her head. No, he didn't. She walked over to the employee board. There were only 3 names listed. Mine. Hers. Maintenance. No Earl. No schedule. No payroll records. No emergency contact information. Nothing. I checked the office computer. No employee file. No tax forms. No hiring records. According to the motel database, Earl Holloway had never existed. Then the radio crackled. Earl to front desk. My blood went cold. Maria heard it too. I knew because her face went white. The radio crackled again. Daniel. That was Earl's voice. Don't answer if she asks about me again. Maria stared at the radio. The radio stared back with silence. Then she whispered, Who was that? That night I checked the security footage. At 11:03 p.m. Earl walked into the office carrying coffee. At 11:04 p.m. he walked behind the camera angle toward the employee hallway. At 11:05 p.m. he no longer appeared in reflections. The coffee pot reflected itself pouring. The office window showed an empty chair where he sat. The microwave door reflected me standing alone. Even when he walked directly in front of mirrors. Nothing. The cameras recorded him. The glass didn't. I watched the footage 6 times before turning it off. The next shift he arrived exactly on time. Same truck. Same uniform. Same coffee. I asked him directly, "Why don't mirrors show you anymore?" He froze. For the first time since I'd met him. He looked afraid. Not nervous. Not uncomfortable. Afraid. "Who told you that?" "I saw the footage." He looked toward room 8. Not the hallway. The wall where the hallway should have continued. Then he sighed. "It starts with reflections." "What starts?" He didn't answer. Instead he asked, "Do you remember your first week here?" "Yeah." "What did I say when I hired you?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I couldn't remember. Not a single detail. Not the interview. Not the paperwork. Not even walking into the office for the first time. The memory was simply missing. Earl nodded slowly. "That's what I was afraid of." The motel started changing after that. Subtle changes. Wrong changes. The soda machine moved to the opposite wall overnight. The office bathroom switched sides. The lobby clock started running backward between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. A hallway appeared behind the laundry room that hadn't existed the previous day. Room numbers shifted. Guests noticed. Employees noticed. Nobody talked about it. As if acknowledging the changes somehow helped them continue. The strangest part wasn't the movement. It was how quickly my brain accepted it. I'd walk past a new hallway and think, "Of course that's always been there." Then 20 minutes later I'd realize it hadn't. Like the motel was editing memories faster than reality. The federal agents returned 3 nights later. This time there were 6 vehicles. More personnel. More equipment. One man carried a camera covered entirely in black tape. Another unloaded cases marked biohazard. Nobody explained anything. One of the agents recognized me. "The employee from last visit." I nodded. She looked concerned. "Still here?" "Yeah." She exchanged a look with another agent. "That's unusual." "What is?" "The average exposure period." I stared at her. "Exposure to what?" She hesitated. Then she said something that still keeps me awake. "Most replacements happen within 6 months." My mouth went dry. "Replacements?" The agent looked toward Earl. Or more accurately, toward the place where Earl stood. Her expression changed immediately. She lowered her voice. "He hasn't noticed yet?" Earl stepped between us. The conversation ended instantly. At 2:31 a.m. every light in the motel went out. Not flickered. Not dimmed. Gone. Emergency power never activated. The radios died. The cameras died. The phones died. Complete silence. Then, 3 knocks. Not from room 8. Every room. Simultaneously. 23 doors. 3 knocks each. Tap. 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 The sound rolled across the property like thunder. Guests started screaming. Doors opened. People flooded into the parking lot. And every single guest asked the same question. "Which room is mine?" Some were crying. Some were bleeding. One elderly man kept repeating that his room had moved while he slept. Another insisted his wife was still inside even though she'd died 6 years earlier. A woman pointed toward room 18. "My son came back." She started running. 2 agents tackled her before she reached the door. She screamed the entire time. "That's my boy!" The agents never looked at room 18. Neither did I. Because standing outside the door, holding the hand of a little boy, was a woman who looked exactly like her. Then the motel sign turned on. Every letter. Bright red neon cutting through the darkness. For the first time since I'd worked there. The sign displayed the full name. Not Red Mesa Motor Lodge. Not even Red Mesa. Just one word. Vacancy. Underneath it, numbers began appearing. 23. 24. 25. 26. Counting down. One number every few seconds. One less vacancy. One more occupied room. The federal agents started shouting. People started running. Earl grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. Listen to me carefully. His voice shook. If that number reaches 0. He stopped speaking. I looked at him. What happens if it reaches 0? For a moment he looked like he wanted to answer. Instead he looked toward the dark outline of room 8. And whispered. It wakes up. The sign changed again. 12. 13. 14. The count was accelerating. And somewhere inside the motel, behind walls that shouldn't exist, I heard footsteps. Hundreds of them. Walking toward us. In perfect synchronization. The vacancy counter hit 0 at 2:43 a.m. Nothing happened. For about 3 seconds. Then every door in the motel opened at once. Not unlocked. Opened. 23 doors swinging inward simultaneously. 23 dark rooms staring back at us. The federal agents raised weapons immediately. The guests stopped screaming. Even the wind disappeared. For a moment the entire property became completely silent. Then someone walked out of room 4. A woman. Mid-30s. Pajamas. Barefoot. Confused. She looked around the parking lot. Why is everyone outside? Nobody answered. Because standing behind her, still inside room 4, was another woman. Identical. Same face. Same pajamas. Same expression. The first woman saw her. The second woman saw the first. Neither screamed. Neither moved. The woman outside finally whispered. No. The woman inside whispered it too. At exactly the same time. Same voice. Same fear. Same timing. One of the agents shouted. Look away from each other! Too late. The two women stepped toward one another. Reached out. Touched hands. The parking lot lights exploded. Glass rained across the asphalt. When my vision cleared, both women were gone. The room behind them was empty. The federal agents looked horrified. Not surprised. Horrified. That distinction mattered. Because surprise means you don't know what's happening. Horror means you do. The same thing was happening all over the property. Room 15. 2 elderly men. Room 11. 2 teenage girls. Room 20. 2 truck drivers. Some copies came from inside. Some came from outside. Each pair finding one another. Each pair staring. Each pair disappearing. Not all at once. One by one. Like names being crossed off a list. The agents started dragging people away from doorways. Covering mirrors. Breaking windows. Shouting instructions. Do not engage your duplicate. Do not answer personal questions. If approach, close your eyes and back away. One guest looked at an agent. What happens if they touch you? The agent didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because we all watched what happened to the woman from room 4. Then I saw him. Standing outside room 8. Me. Not the version from the snowstorm. Not the older version from the buses. This one looked exactly like I did that night. Same uniform. Same flashlight clipped to my belt. Same terrified expression. He looked at me and immediately shook his head. Don't come closer. I stopped. He looked exhausted. Like he hadn't slept in weeks. Maybe months. Behind him, the wall between rooms 7 and 9 was gone. There was a door there now. Room 8. Finally visible. Old wood. Black paint. No handle. Just a brass number screwed into the center. 8. The duplicate looked back at it. Then back at me. You can't let it learn your name. I stared at him. It already knows my name. His expression somehow became worse. No. He swallowed. I mean your real one. Before I could ask what that meant, the door opened. Outward. Slowly. The darkness inside wasn't normal darkness. Flashlights disappeared into it. Light didn't enter the room. It stopped at the doorway. Like illumination itself refused to cross the threshold. One of the agents approached carefully. Motion sensor. Camera equipment. Thermal scanner. Every device immediately failed. Static. Dead batteries. Corrupted displays. The agent stepped closer. The darkness moved. Not inside the room. Toward him. Like fog rolling downhill. He stumbled backward. Pulled off his headset. Blood poured from his ears. He looked directly at the team leader. Then asked, "Which one of you brought me here?" The agents froze. The man turned slowly in a circle. Confusion turned into panic. "Why don't I remember arriving?" Nobody answered. Because none of us had seen him arrive. He had simply been there. Standing with the agents. Part of the group. As if he'd always been there. The team leader lowered her weapon. "What's your employee number?" The man frowned. "I don't know." "What division?" Silence. "What was your assignment before tonight?" The man's breathing accelerated. "I don't remember." The team leader closed her eyes. Then quietly said, "He's already gone." The other agents escorted him away. He never resisted. He just kept looking confused. Like a man waking up halfway through someone else's life. I looked back toward my duplicate. He was staring into room 8. "It's awake now." "What is?" His eyes met mine. "The motel." I laughed despite myself. "The motel isn't alive." He looked genuinely surprised. "You still think the motel is the building?" That sentence hit me harder than it should have. Because deep down, I already knew what he meant. The rooms moved. The hallways changed. The room numbers shifted. Room 8 migrated. The building wasn't constant. Only the phenomenon was. The motel wasn't a location. The building was merely where it happened to be feeding. The duplicate pointed toward the parking lot. I followed his finger. Every guest vehicle was gone. Cars. Trucks. Motorcycles. All missing. In their place sat 23 identical black sedans. No license plates. No markings. All parked perfectly within the lines. All engines running. I looked at the agents. They looked terrified. One whispered. It spread again. The team leader finally gathered us in the lobby. Employees. Agents. Remaining guests. 14 people total. Or at least we thought 14. She placed a folder on the desk. Government seal. Classified. Then she opened it. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Roadside diners. Gas stations. Apartment complexes. Hospitals. Office buildings. Schools. Hotels. Motels. Every picture had one thing in common. Room 8. Sometimes it was Apartment 8. Sometimes Unit 8. Ward 8. Office 8. Gate 8. Always 8. Always appearing after a duplication event. Always disappearing afterward. One photograph made my blood run cold. An apartment building in Nevada. Dated 6 months in the future. Apartment number 8. My apartment. My address. My building. My home. The team leader looked directly at me. It followed you once already. The room fell silent. I stared at the photograph. No. She nodded. It doesn't stay where it feeds. My mouth went dry. What exactly is it? For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Earl answered from behind us. Not the agents. Not the government. Earl. It's a migration. Everyone turned toward him. His expression looked tired. Ancient somehow. Predators migrate for food. He looked toward room 8. So do mirrors. Then one of the guests screamed. We all turned. The motel sign outside had changed again. No longer vacancy. No longer numbers. Just one sentence glowing in red neon. Welcome back, Daniel. My duplicate looked at the sign, then at me. And for the first time, he looked afraid of me. Not for me. Of me. You stayed too long. What does that mean? He took a step backward. It means you're not the one it followed. The room went silent. My heart stopped. He looked directly into my eyes. You brought it here. Before I could respond, the lights returned. Every television in every room turned on. Every screen showed the same security footage. The lobby. The front desk. My first day working at Red Mesa. Only there was one problem. The footage showed Earl hiring someone. Showing someone the rules. Handing someone the employee binder. That someone wasn't me. It was my duplicate. The one standing beside room 8. The timestamp on the video read, March 14, 1998. 11 years before the motel fire. 38 years before my birth. And standing behind the front desk, wearing my face, was the night auditor who supposedly died in room 8. Smiling directly into the camera. Waiting for me to remember him. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The television continued playing silently. My face moved across the grainy footage from 1998. My face laughed at something Earl said. My face signed employment paperwork. My face accepted a key ring. March 14, 1998. 11 years before the fire. 38 years before I was born. The timestamp remained in the corner of the screen the entire time. Unchanging. Impossible. One of the agents shut the television off. The screen turned black. My reflection stared back at me. Then it blinked. Half a second later than I did. I looked away immediately. The team leader introduced herself for the first time. Agent Holloway. The name hit me immediately. I looked toward Earl. He looked toward her. Neither seemed surprised. The resemblance was obvious now. Same eyes. Same jawline. Same way of standing with one hand near the radio. Daughter? I asked. She nodded. Was. I frowned. Was? She looked toward Earl. Officially, my father died in 1998. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. The man you've been working with for 14 months died before I graduated high school. I looked at Earl. He looked tired. Not caught. Not exposed. Just tired. Earl? I asked. He rubbed his eyes. I was hoping we'd get another year. Nobody pointed guns at him. That surprised me. The agents weren't reacting like they had discovered an infiltrator. They were reacting like a bridge had started collapsing while they were still standing on it. Agent Holloway spoke quietly. When did you realize? Earl thought about it. 2009. And you stayed? He nodded. Someone had to train the replacements. The room became very quiet. I stared at him. The replacements? Earl looked directly at me. The people who come back. He sat down heavily in one of the lobby chairs. For the first time since I'd met him. He looked old. Very old. The fire wasn't an accident. Nobody interrupted him. In 1998 they tried to destroy the entrance. He nodded toward room 8. They evacuated the guests, poured fuel through the walls, and burned the entire property down. He smiled bitterly. 3 days later the motel reopened 30 miles east. My stomach turned. What do you mean reopened? The same motel. He shrugged. Different building. Agent Holloway opened another file. Photographs spilled across the desk. Different decades. Different states. Different architecture. 1956. A roadside inn in Texas. 1968. A ski lodge in Colorado. 1979. A motel in Nevada. 1998. Red Mesa. 2011. An apartment complex in Utah. 2022. A retirement community in New Mexico. Each location had eventually developed an 8. Room 8. Building 8. Section 8. Ward 8. Every site eventually experienced disappearances. Memory inconsistencies. Identity duplication. Then relocation. Migration. The thing never stayed in one place forever. Because predators exhaust food sources. Then move on. How many people? I asked. The room stayed silent. How many replacements? Agent Holloway finally answered. We don't know. I laughed nervously. You have to know approximately. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she slid a photograph across the desk. A family portrait. Mother. Father. 2 children. Normal people. Normal smiles. The date on the back read 2003. Then she handed me another photograph. Same family. Same pose. Same house. Same clothing. The date read 2004. At first glance, they looked identical. Then I noticed the details. The father's wedding ring had switched hands. The daughter's freckles had changed sides. The dog was missing. The mother had a scar she didn't have previously. Tiny differences. Almost invisible. Agent Holloway looked exhausted. How many replacements? She pointed at the picture. How many originals? Nobody had an answer for that. Earl stood up slowly. It doesn't kill people. Everyone looked at him. It archives them. The room stayed silent. He pointed toward room 8. The copies aren't copies. I felt cold suddenly. What are they then? He hesitated. Versions. Versions of what? You. He looked around the room. Every decision creates possibilities. Every face in the lobby remained fixed on him. The motel gathers the versions that didn't happen. The truck driver who opened the door. The woman who looked outside. The deputy who stayed in town. The child who survived the accident. The husband who never left for ice. Possibilities. Abandoned timelines. Lives that almost existed. They come here because this place is the only place they can exist. I shook my head. That's impossible. Earl smiled weakly. So is seeing your own corpse on surveillance footage from before your birth. Fair point. But why replace people? I asked. Earl looked toward room 8. They aren't replacing anyone. He swallowed. They're going home. That sentence landed harder than anything else that night. Because it implied something horrifying. Replacement only exists if you know which version was original. And what if you don't? What if the person coming back belongs here more than you do? What if you're the visitor? Agent Holloway finally opened the lockbox. The government one. The box that only opened if room 8 became occupied. Inside sat a cassette tape. Nothing else. No labels. No instructions. Only handwriting on the case. For the current Daniel. My hands started shaking. Current? Nobody looked surprised by the wording. That terrified me. Agent Holloway inserted the tape into an old recorder. Static filled the room. Then a voice spoke. Mine. Older. Exhausted. If you're hearing this, the migration reached another cycle. I stopped breathing. The voice continued. My name is Daniel Mercer. A pause. Or at least it was when I recorded this. Everyone looked at me. The tape continued. If Earl is still there, don't blame him. Earl closed his eyes. He stayed because I asked him to. The recording crackled. You need to understand something before you make the same mistake I made. Another pause. The copies aren't the threat. Every person in the room stared at the recorder. My older voice continued. Roommate doesn't create them. Silence. It creates us. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The recording continued. The motel builds identities the same way storms build lightning. My older self sounded defeated. It assembles memories. Experiences. Histories. Families. Childhoods. Entire lives. My mouth went dry. No. The tape ignored me. The originals aren't replaced because there were never originals. Agent Holloway looked away. Apparently she'd heard this before. The tape crackled again. The question isn't whether you're real. A long pause followed. The question is how long you've been here. The recorder clicked. Silence. I looked toward Earl. He couldn't meet my eyes. Neither could Agent Holloway. That told me everything. You knew. Nobody answered. You all knew. Earl finally nodded. We suspected. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because sometimes your brain reacts to terror by pretending it's comedy. So what? I spread my arms. I'm fake? No. Earl shook his head immediately. Not fake. He struggled for words. Temporary. That was somehow worse. Then the motel intercom turned on. Static. A click. Then my voice filled every room. Not from the tape. Live. Current. Daniel. The voice sounded calm. Patient. We need to talk. The lobby lights flickered. The wall between rooms 7 and 9 slowly opened. Not a door opening. A wall unfolding. Beyond it stretched a hallway. Impossible length. Hundreds of doors. Every single one marked with the same brass number. 8. The voice spoke again. You've worked here longer than anyone. I felt cold. That's not true. The voice ignored me. It's time for your promotion. At the end of the impossible hallway, standing beneath a flickering light, waited someone wearing my uniform. My face. My voice. My memories. Only older. Far older. He smiled sadly. And raised the employee key ring. On the empty hook where roommate's key used to hang. There was now a tag with my name on it. Employee of the month. Daniel Mercer. Start date. March 14th, 1998. No end date listed. For a long time. Nobody moved. The impossible hallway stretched beyond the broken wall like it had always been there. Hundreds of identical doors. Hundreds of roommates. Each one perfectly spaced. Perfectly aligned. Perfectly wrong. The older version of me stood beneath the flickering lights holding the employee key ring. Waiting. Not threatening. Not smiling. Waiting. Like a man arriving for a shift change. You don't have to go. Agent Holloway said it immediately. Too quickly. Like she'd rehearsed saying those words before. The older version of me tilted his head. Yes, he does. His voice sounded exactly like mine. Same accent. Same rhythm. Same nervous habit of swallowing before difficult sentences. He just doesn't know why yet. I looked at Earl. Tell me he's not me. Earl stayed silent. That answer was enough. The older Daniel stepped into the lobby. The agents raised their weapons. He ignored them. Not arrogantly. The way you'd ignore rain. Something irrelevant. Something incapable of changing the outcome. He stopped 6 feet away from me. Close enough that I could see details. Tiny details. The scar on his chin sat slightly lower than mine. His hairline had receded a little. His left hand shook almost imperceptibly. He looked exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that lives inside bone marrow. I know what you're thinking, he said. No, you don't. He smiled sadly. I know exactly what you're thinking. He looked around the room. Because I thought it too. He pointed toward the hallway. Door 43. Nobody moved. Open it. Agent Holloway shook her head immediately. We don't interact with internal structures. The older Daniel looked at her. You already do? Then he looked back at me. Door 43. Against every survival instinct I had. I walked forward. The hallway felt colder than the desert outside. Not temperature. Absence. Like walking into a place that existed before heat. Door 43 opened easily. Inside was my childhood bedroom. I stopped breathing. The posters. The furniture. The baseball trophies. The crack in the window from the storm when I was 12. Everything exactly right. Except for one thing. On the desk sat a photograph. My mother. My father. Me. And my brother. I don't have a brother. Never had one. Yet looking at the picture felt wrong in exactly the opposite way. Not unfamiliar. Forgotten. Memories started surfacing immediately. Fishing trips. Birthday parties. Arguments. A funeral. My brother dying in a car accident when he was 17. Memories. Real memories. Memories that didn't belong to me. Except they did. I remembered all of it. Every detail. Every moment. Every feeling. I stumbled backward into the hallway. What was that? The older Daniel answered quietly. Another version of your life. He opened door 12. Inside was an apartment in Seattle. Wedding photographs covered the walls. A woman stood in the kitchen cooking dinner. She looked up and smiled. You're home early. My chest tightened. I knew her name. Emily. I knew how we met. I knew our anniversary. I knew the sound of her laugh. I remembered proposing. I remembered holding our daughter in a hospital room. I remembered her leaving me 7 years later. None of it happened. Every bit of it happened. The memories slammed into me so hard I nearly fell. The older Daniel closed the door. You applied for a job in Seattle when you were 22. I stared at him. I never got an interview. He nodded. Another version of you did. Door after door opened. Lives. Entire lives. Teacher. Police officer. Marine. Mechanic. Father. Widower. Alcoholic. Millionaire. Dead at 21. Dead at 68. Happy. Miserable. Successful. Forgotten. Hundreds of Daniels. Thousands maybe. All existing somewhere behind numbered doors. Not copies. Possibilities. Every version of my life that could have happened. Every road not taken. Every decision branching forever. Then I noticed something. Every hallway had people. Not just me. Everyone. Every room contained versions of someone. Different lives. Different histories. Different choices. The motel wasn't storing monsters. It was storing humanity. The roads not traveled. The children never born. The conversations never had. The wars never fought. Entire civilizations of almost. I looked back at the older Daniel. What is this place? For the first time. He looked afraid. A waiting room. My stomach dropped. For what? He looked toward the endless doors. For replacement. Agent Holloway stepped forward. No. The older Daniel met her eyes. You know it's true. She didn't answer. Because she didn't know. The government knew. Maybe they'd always known. The older Daniel pointed toward the parking lot. The world outside isn't stable anymore. Nobody spoke. Too many contradictions. Too many branches. Too many possibilities existing at once. He looked at me. Reality is running out of room. The agents looked uncomfortable. Not skeptical. Uncomfortable. Like hearing classified information spoken out loud. The motel chooses people now. He continued. People with too many alternatives. He pointed directly at me. You were selected before you were born. I laughed. That's impossible. He nodded toward the televisions. The footage replayed automatically. 1998. Me standing behind the desk. My face. My body. My uniform. 38 years before my birth. You weren't born after Red Mesa. He looked exhausted. Red Mesa happened after you. The sentence broke something inside my head. Not emotionally. Structurally. My memories suddenly felt assembled. Placed. Organized. I remembered childhood events from photographs. I remembered conversations I had no reason to remember. Teachers whose names I shouldn't know. Neighbors I hadn't thought about in 20 years. Memories arranged too perfectly. Too clean. Too complete. Like files in a cabinet. Not experiences. Records. Then came the major reveal. Earl spoke. Quietly. I wasn't the first Earl. Everyone looked at him. There have been 7. My stomach turned. 7 what? Managers. He smiled weakly. The motel likes continuity. He looked toward Agent Holloway. My daughter died in 1998. Agent Holloway closed her eyes. The man standing here is version 7. Silence. Earl continued. The first Earl stayed because he thought he could contain it. The second stayed because he thought he could understand it. The third stayed because he thought he could destroy it. He looked at me. The 4th through 6th stayed because they couldn't remember leaving. I felt sick. Which one are you? He smiled. I don't know anymore. Then the older Daniel spoke the words that changed everything. There was never a fire. Everyone froze. Agent Holloway looked up immediately. Don't. But he continued. The fire is the cover story. He pointed toward the wall of televisions. The truth was worse. The screens changed. Security footage. March 14, 1998. The parking lot. Guests running. Federal vehicles arriving. Then, the sky opening. Not metaphorically. Literally. A crack stretching across the stars. Darkness behind it. The motel sign glowing red. People walking out of empty air. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Versions. Possibilities. Flooding into the parking lot. The footage ended. The room remained silent. The older Daniel looked at me. The government didn't burn the motel down. He swallowed. They closed the door. I stared at the screen. Did it work? His expression answered before his mouth did. No. He looked toward room 8. Because it wasn't a door. He paused. It was an evacuation route. Nobody spoke. Nobody could. The implication settled over the room slowly. Coldly. If millions of alternate lives existed somewhere else. If reality outside was becoming unstable. If the motel wasn't containing them. Then what exactly had humanity been standing on all this time? The older Daniel finally answered the question nobody wanted to ask. We aren't keeping them out. He looked toward the endless hallway of room 8S. We're keeping this side in. Then every door in the hallway opened at once. Hundreds. Thousands. Infinite. People stepped into the corridor. Versions. Alternatives. Possibilities. Every age. Every face. Every life. And every single version of me. Looked directly at me. At the same moment. And spoke in perfect synchronization. Daniel. The sound shook the walls. Shook the windows. Shook the desert itself. One sentence followed. The same sentence spoken by thousands of versions of my voice. You were supposed to remember by now. And suddenly. I did. I remembered working at Red Mesa in 1998. I remembered dying in the fire that never happened. I remembered rebuilding the motel somewhere else. I remembered training Earl. I remembered recording the tape. I remembered leaving. I remembered coming back. Again. And again. And again. Not one life. Not one timeline. Hundreds. Thousands. Cycles. The same job. The same motel. The same roommate. Over and over. Because I wasn't the next night auditor. I was the first one. And somehow. I always had been. The memories didn't return all at once. They hit in waves. Fragments first. A coffee stain on the front desk in 1998. The smell of smoke that never existed. A conversation with Earl under a sky that wasn't ours. Standing in the parking lot while impossible stars moved overhead. Then larger pieces. Entire years. Entire lives. Entire versions of myself stacking on top of one another until I couldn't tell where one ended and another began. I remembered being 29. I remembered being 63. I remembered dying in the desert. I remembered dying in a hospital. I remembered living long enough to have grandchildren. I remembered never making it past 30. Thousands of memories. Thousands of Daniels. And somehow, every single one of them had worked at the motel. At some point. In some cycle. For some reason. I dropped to one knee. The pressure inside my head felt unbearable. Not pain. Density. Like my mind was trying to hold an ocean inside a drinking glass. The older Daniel knelt beside me. It passes. I looked at him. When? He considered the question carefully. Eventually. Not exactly reassuring. Agent Holloway stepped closer. How much do you remember? I looked up at her. The better question is, how much do you remember? Her expression changed immediately. Because I suddenly remembered her too. Not this version. Others. Hundreds of versions. Agent Holloway as a teenager helping her father in the office. Agent Holloway dying during an evacuation in 2011. Agent Holloway working for the government in Denver. Agent Holloway never joining the agency at all. Different lives. Different outcomes. Different histories. Same person. Same eyes. Same fear. The realization hit both of us at the same time. She remembered too. Her face went pale. Oh God! The older Daniel stood. It spreads when enough people remember. The agents looked nervous. Not because of what he said. Because they already knew it was true. One of them quietly removed his earpiece. Another sat down against the wall. A third stared into space as tears rolled down his face. Memories. Not theirs. Not entirely. Maybe all of them. Maybe none. The government calls it convergence syndrome. Agent Holloway spoke automatically. Professional instinct taking over. Early symptoms include memory contamination, emotional attachment to unfamiliar events, and recognition of individuals never encountered. The older Daniel nodded. Late-stage symptoms? She looked toward the hallway. Consensus failure. I frowned. What does that mean? Earl answered. It means reality stops agreeing with itself. The motel lights flickered. Outside. The desert changed. Not gradually. Instantly. The mountains disappeared. Replaced by forest. Then ocean. Then snow-covered fields. Different horizons every few seconds. Different worlds pressing against the windows. The parking lot became wet asphalt under city lights. Then dirt beneath two moons. Then frozen ground beneath an aurora I didn't recognize. The motel wasn't moving. Reality outside it was. Like channels changing on a television. Like somebody searching for the correct station. One of the guests screamed. We turned. The windows no longer reflected the lobby. They reflected other versions of it. One showed an empty building covered in dust. Another showed soldiers barricading the doors. Another showed blood covering the walls. Another showed children playing cards at the front desk. Different motels. Different timelines. Different outcomes. All occupying the same physical space. At the same time. The older Daniel looked toward the windows. It's getting worse. What's getting worse? He pointed outside. The separation. He walked to the front desk. Opened the old employee binder. The rules had changed. Not rewritten. Expanded. Pages filled the binder now. Hundreds of them. Thousands maybe. Rules for events I'd never experienced. Rules for locations I'd never seen. Rules for people who didn't exist. Rule 104. If two sunsets occur on the same evening, close all curtains immediately. Rule 208. If guests begin remembering one another from different lives, separate them for 12 hours. Rule 411. If the ocean becomes visible from the parking lot, prepare for relocation. Rule 701. If Daniel remembers the station, the cycle is ending. My stomach tightened. The station? The older Daniel closed the binder. For the first time. He looked genuinely afraid. The motel isn't the institution. Silence. It's an outpost. The room went completely quiet. He pointed upward. Not at the ceiling. Beyond it. Red Mesa was Station 8. The words felt wrong somehow. Too large for the room they occupied. Station 8 of what? I asked. He hesitated. Then, the boundary network. The agents didn't interrupt. That scared me more than the answer. Because they already knew. He walked toward the window. The universe isn't a place. He tapped the glass. It's an agreement. Nobody moved. Most of reality only exists because enough observers agree that it exists. He looked back at us. But eventually, he searched for the right words. Possibilities accumulate. Branches. Alternatives. Unchosen outcomes. Lives not lived. Worlds not selected. They don't disappear. They collect. Pressure builds. Until eventually, the walls separating realities begin to weaken. The stations were built to stabilize the boundaries. I stared at him. Built by who? The older Daniel smiled. That answer scared me immediately. Us. Not humanity. Not governments. Us. The Daniels. The Earls. The Holloways. The employees. The people who remembered. Across enough cycles. Across enough timelines. Across enough realities. Someone eventually discovered the problem. Someone eventually built the first station. Someone eventually became the first employee. Somewhere along the way. That someone was me. Or a version of me. Maybe the first version. Maybe the last. Maybe both. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because what else do you do when you discover your job description includes maintaining the structural integrity of existence? So what? I spread my arms. We're Cosmic Hotel staff? The older Daniel smiled sadly. More like maintenance. Then he said the sentence that changed the entire story. The Skinwalkers aren't invaders. The room fell silent. He looked toward room 8. They're refugees. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed. He continued quietly. Their realities collapsed first. Images flashed through my mind. Cities dissolving into static. Families losing memories. People waking up in lives that weren't theirs. Entire worlds failing to agree on what had happened yesterday. Consensus failure. Reality erosion. Civilizations disappearing because existence itself stopped remaining consistent. They came here because there was nowhere else left. I remembered the truck driver. The husband from room 12. The smiling figures outside windows. The people asking which room belonged to them. Not predators. Displaced people. Lost people. Versions searching for somewhere stable enough to survive. Some became desperate. Some became violent. Some forgot who they had been. Some borrowed identities because they couldn't hold on to their own anymore. The motel wasn't attracting monsters. It was processing survivors. Then I understood the real horror. If they're refugees. The older Daniel nodded slowly. Then what are they running from? Nobody answered immediately. Because everyone in the room already knew. The answer had been outside the windows all night. Changing skies. Changing landscapes. Changing realities. Something was coming. Something large enough to make entire universes evacuate. Something that made the collapse of worlds seem survivable by comparison. The older Daniel looked toward the darkness inside room 8. His voice became very quiet. We call it the silence. The name landed heavily. Not dramatic. Not mythical. Just descriptive. It isn't a creature. It isn't intelligent. It isn't alive. He swallowed. It's what happens after reality stops being observed. Every light in the motel dimmed simultaneously. The televisions shut off. The radios died. Outside, every version of the landscape vanished. The windows became black. Not nighttime black. Absence black. Nothing black. The kind of darkness that exists before stars are invented. The older Daniel looked at me. It found us. For the first time since meeting him. He sounded afraid. Truly afraid. Not of death. Not of roommate. Not of replacement. Afraid the way sailors must have sounded when describing the edge of old maps. Then came the sound. Not a roar. Not footsteps. Not voices. The absence of all of those things. The coyotes stopped. The wind stopped. The humming lights stopped. Even breathing seemed quieter. As if sound itself was retreating. The motel sign outside flickered one final time. 3 words appeared in red neon. No vacancy remaining. Then the sign went dark. And somewhere beyond the windows, something enormous noticed us. Not the motel. Us. Every version. Every timeline. Every possibility. Watching. Waiting. Hungry in a way hunger was never meant to mean. The older Daniel slowly handed me the employee key ring. His expression was calm now. Resigned. I think I remember what comes next. I looked at him. What? He glanced toward the endless hallway of roommate S. Then back at me. We build another station. And suddenly I understood why every version of me had worked at the motel. Not because I was trapped. Not because I was chosen. Because somewhere, in some forgotten version of history, I had volunteered. The first thing the silence took was distance. I know that sentence doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense while it was happening either. The mountains vanished first. Then the horizon. Then the space between the motel and the parking lot. One moment the neon sign stood 50 feet away. The next moment it hung directly outside the lobby window. Not closer. There simply wasn't any longer a concept of between. The universe outside was folding inward. Not collapsing. Simplifying. Reducing. Removing unnecessary things. Space. Light. History. Eventually. People. The federal radios came back online all at once. Every channel broadcasting the same message. Not voices. Coordinates. Thousands of them. Rapidly updating. Changing every second. Agent Holloway stared at the numbers. They're gone. What is? The stations. She looked sick. Station 2 just disappeared. A second later. Station 5. Then. Station 11. Every few seconds another coordinate vanished. Another outpost gone. Another boundary failing. Somewhere. Other versions of this exact conversation were ending badly. The older Daniel looked toward roommate. It's moving faster than before. What's different this time? He gave me a tired smile. You remembered. The hallway beyond roommate had changed. The doors were disappearing. Not exploding. Not collapsing. Vanishing. Door 143. Gone. Door 87. Gone. Entire lives erased without sound. Without violence. Without evidence they had existed at all. Every disappearing door carried with it entire histories. Entire worlds. Entire civilizations. Not dying. Being forgotten. The older Daniel looked at one of the empty spaces where a door had been. I was married in there. He pointed toward another. My daughter existed in that one. Another empty space. I learned piano there. Another. I died old. Another. I died young. He looked at me. You get used to mourning people nobody else remembers. Then something stepped out of the darkness beyond the hallway. Not a creature. Not exactly. A silhouette. Human-shaped only because my brain couldn't process what it was actually seeing. It moved wrong. Not physically wrong. Narratively wrong. Like a character walking into the wrong movie. The room became quieter around it. The lights dimmed slightly as it passed. The older Daniel immediately stepped in front of me. Don't look at it for too long. Why? Because it'll start making sense. That answer terrified me more than if he'd said it would kill me. The silhouette stopped at the entrance to the hallway. Waiting. Patient. It wasn't hunting. It wasn't threatening. It was simply the next stage of the process. Like winter. Like erosion. Like time. The older Daniel whispered. The silence doesn't destroy realities. I looked at him. It finishes them. Agent Holloway stepped forward. We still have the relay. The older Daniel nodded. One transmission. She looked at me. Enough to start another station. Suddenly I understood. The station wasn't a building. The motel wasn't the structure. The station was information. Rules. Memories. Procedures. Warnings. A continuity package. Instructions passed from cycle to cycle. Survival guides for realities under pressure. The motel could become anything. Apartment building. Hospital. School. Airport terminal. As long as Rule 8 survived. The station survived. Earl smiled. The first genuine smile I'd ever seen from him. That's why the rules matter. Not protection. Preservation. Institutional memory. Humanity had turned survival into procedure. Laminated instructions against oblivion. The older Daniel handed me the black employee binder. It felt heavier than paper should feel. Inside. Thousands of rules. Thousands of lives. Thousands of failures converted into knowledge. Every rule written by someone who learned it too late. Rule 3. Never answer the third knock. Rule 24. Do not speak to your own voice. Rule 411. Prepare for relocation. Rules written in fear. Rules written in grief. Rules written so somebody else might get one more chance. Take it. I looked at him. What about you? He smiled sadly. I already had my turn. The hallway behind him continued disappearing. Door after door after door. His world was ending. Mine apparently wasn't. Not yet. The silhouette took another step forward. The older Daniel suddenly froze. His expression changed. Not fear. Recognition. He looked at the figure and whispered. Oh. I stared at him. What? He looked back at me. It's me. My blood went cold. What? He smiled softly. The version that stayed behind. Memories hit him immediately. I could see it happening. His eyes widened. His shoulders relaxed. 30 years of fear disappeared from his face. I remember now. The silhouette moved closer. The older Daniel looked relieved. Not terrified. Relieved. Like a man finally recognizing someone waiting at an airport. He looked at me one final time. It isn't death. The silhouette reached him. It just means your story stops being told. Then he stepped forward willingly. The darkness folded around him. No scream. No violence. No body. Just absence. Like a sentence ending with a period. And then, he was gone. The hallway continued disappearing. The remaining doors counted down towards 0. 21. 17. 9. 3. Each number felt heavier than the last. The motel itself started changing around us. The lobby walls flickered. Hospital corridor. School hallway. Apartment lobby. Airport gate. Different stations. Different cycles. Different masks worn by the same institution. I looked at Agent Holloway. Where does the next one go? She checked the relay device. Coordinates appeared on the screen. Then a name. My stomach dropped. Narayanganj. Bangladesh. A building permit application. Structure designation. Residential Tower 8. Construction date. August 2027. The next station. The next roommate. The next place reality would hide its refugees. The final door in the hallway disappeared. The corridor beyond room 8 became completely dark. The silence waited there. Watching. Not impatient. Not angry. Certain. Because eventually every story ends. Eventually every observer disappears. Eventually every universe runs out of witnesses. The question was never whether the silence would win. Only how long humanity could keep talking before it did. Earl walked over beside me. Ready for orientation? Despite everything. I laughed. He handed me a laminated sheet. One rule. Only one. Written in red ink. If Station 8 relocates, make sure someone remembers the rules. I looked up. Earl. He was gone. Not vanished. Not taken. Finished. His chair sat empty. His coffee cup remained warm. His reflection still stood in the window for several seconds after he disappeared. Then that was gone too. Outside, the darkness retreated. Slowly. Reluctantly. Stars returned. Wind returned. Sound returned. The parking lot returned. The motel sign flickered back to life. 3 words glowed in soft red neon. Now hiring night auditor. Agent Holloway looked at me. So. I already knew the question before she asked it. Are you staying? I looked at the employee binder. The key ring. The empty hook waiting for room 8's key. Then I looked toward the darkness between rooms 7 and 9. Toward the place where the hallway had existed. Toward the place where it would exist again. Eventually. Somebody would need the rules. Somebody always did. I clipped the keys onto my belt. And opened the binder. The first thing I did after accepting the keys was look for room 8. It wasn't there. Room 7. Room 9. Blank wall between them. Fresh paint. No doorway. No hallway. No impossible darkness. Nothing. If I hadn't watched it happen myself, I would have believed none of it had happened. The federal agents packed equipment into black SUVs. The remaining guests left before sunrise. Nobody said goodbye. Nobody exchanged numbers. Nobody asked questions. People who survive things they can't explain rarely do. Agent Holloway stayed behind. She handed me a thin manila envelope. No government markings. No classification stamps. Only handwriting. For the next manager. Inside were 6 photographs. 6 different motels. 6 different decades. 6 different men standing behind 6 different front desks. Every single one was Earl. Different ages. Different faces around the eyes. Different uniforms. Same tired expression. Same coffee cup. Same name tag. Earl Holloway. Manager. The final photograph showed him standing beside someone else. Me. Older. Holding the employee binder. The date on the back read August 12, 2027. Over a year in the future. The location printed beneath it made my stomach turn. Narayanganj, Bangladesh. I looked up immediately. Why there? Agent Holloway looked genuinely surprised. You remember the location? I nodded. She looked uncomfortable. Most people don't. Answer the question. She hesitated. Then. Population density. I frowned. What? The stations survive longer in crowded places. She looked toward the empty parking lot. Too many observers. Suddenly the concept made horrifying sense. Small towns disappear quietly. Crowded cities don't. Reality remains stable where enough people agree on it. Observation creates consensus. Consensus creates continuity. Continuity creates survival. Which meant isolated motels in the desert had become obsolete. Humanity itself was becoming the wall. 3 days later I drove back to Red Mesa. I don't know why. Closure maybe. Curiosity. Guilt. The road ended exactly where the map said it would. No motel. No parking lot. No sign. Nothing. Just empty desert stretching toward the horizon. There wasn't even evidence a building had ever existed there. No foundations. No debris. Nothing. My GPS insisted I had arrived. My eyes disagreed. Then I noticed something in the sand. A brass room key. Number 8. Half buried beneath the dust. I never touched it. Life tried returning to normal after that. Work. Bills. Groceries. Traffic. Normal things. For a while it almost worked. Then the mistakes started. A waitress called me by a name I'd never used. A cashier asked whether my daughter wanted a receipt. I don't have a daughter. At least I don't think I do. Twice I caught myself driving toward houses I'd never lived in. Once I woke up knowing the layout of an apartment in Seattle I'd never rented. Sometimes I miss my brother. The one who never existed. His birthday is October 17th. I still remember that somehow. The memories weren't fading. They were accumulating. More lives. More versions. More roads not taken. Sometimes I know how conversations will end before they happen. Sometimes I remember meeting people before introductions occur. Sometimes strangers recognize me. Really recognize me. Like we're continuing conversations I don't remember starting. Maybe we are. 6 months ago I received a package with no return address. Inside was a laminated employee handbook. Updated edition. 5 new rules added. Rule 803. If you begin remembering lives that feel happier than your own, avoid making comparisons. Rule 819. Do not attempt to locate deceased alternatives. Rule 832. If a child recognizes you by another name, ask which station they came from. Rule 901. If construction begins on Building 8 nearby, prepare for transfer. Rule 999. If you hear knocking from a wall that should not contain a room, answer carefully. The final page contained a handwritten note. See you soon. Asterisk girl. Last month construction started 3 blocks from my apartment. 32-story residential complex. Luxury units. Ground floor retail. Completion estimate. August 2027. Project name. The 8th Tower. I quit reading after that. Yesterday I drove past the construction site on my way home from work. Workers were unloading steel beams. Concrete trucks lined the street. Normal construction noise. Normal city sounds. Then I noticed the floor plans posted beside the entrance gate. Apartment 801. Apartment 802. Apartment 803. Apartment 804. Apartment 805. Apartment 806. Apartment 807. The next page was missing. It jumped directly to 809. Nobody else seemed to notice. I asked one of the workers about it. He looked confused. There isn't an 808. Why not? He shrugged. Architectural decision. Then he frowned. Funny though. What is? I could have sworn there used to be one. Last week I started hearing coyotes at night. That wouldn't normally mean much. Except I live in the middle of a city. There are no coyotes here. Not real ones anyway. They stop every night at exactly 2:17 a.m. 3 minutes later. The knocking starts. 3 slow knocks. Always from the same wall. My bedroom wall. The wall facing east. The wall that backs onto open air 20 floors above the street. Tap. 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 Always 3 times. Never 4. Never 2. The first few nights I ignored it. The rules exist for a reason. Then came the voice. Quiet. Almost apologetic. Daniel? My voice. Of course it was my voice. Everything important eventually becomes your own voice. The knocking came again. Tap. 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 Then, I think I'm in the wrong room. I didn't answer. The voice spoke again. You said you'd remember this time? I haven't slept much since then. Because part of me remembers saying that. Not in this life. Not in this apartment. Somewhere else. Someone else. Another station. Another cycle. Another version of me standing beside another roommate. Making promises I haven't made yet. Keeping promises I don't remember making. 3 nights ago the knocking stopped. That should have made me feel better. Instead it terrified me. Because Rule 22 still exists. If the coyotes stop making noise, Lock the office immediately. Wait for them to start again. The coyotes haven't come back. This morning I found something hanging beside my apartment door. A brass employee key. My name engraved beneath it. Daniel Mercer. Night Manager. Start date: March 14th, 1998. No end date. Only one additional line had been added. Transfer approved. Location: Station 8. Narayanganj Sector. August 2027. I checked the calendar 3 times after reading it. Today is July 4th, 2026. 13 months early. Either the paperwork is wrong, or the station is moving ahead of schedule. Neither possibility makes me feel better. Because if there's one thing I learned working at the Red Mesa Motor Lodge, it's that institutions only accelerate procedures during emergencies. And if Station 8 is relocating early, then something out there is moving faster than it should. Something close enough to force an evacuation. Something close enough that even the refugees are running. About 20 minutes before I started recording this story, someone knocked on my apartment wall. 3 slow taps. Tap. 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 Then silence. Then my voice. Older this time. Tired. Patient. The same voice from the cassette tape. The same voice from roommate. The same voice from the hallway. He only said one sentence. Training starts Monday. If you live in a large apartment building. If your workplace skips a roommate. If a hotel key ever arrives with no room number printed on it. Pay attention. Especially if someone asks whether the building has always had the same number of rooms. Especially if construction workers seem confused about missing floor plans. Especially if you hear coyotes where coyotes shouldn't exist. And if you ever wake up at exactly 2:17 a.m. and hear 3 slow knocks coming from somewhere that shouldn't contain a door. Don't ask who's there. Don't answer questions. And whatever you do, don't say your name. Because according to the employee handbook, that's apparently how orientation begins. And judging by the second key hanging beside my front door this morning, I don't think they're hiring anymore. I think they're replacing staff. The strange part is, I don't remember applying. The stranger part is, somewhere deep down, I remember accepting the job. More than once. And the strangest part of all? Tonight, for the first time in months, the coyotes started howling again. Which means, according to the rules, whatever was outside my wall isn't outside anymore.